Did you notice this mistake in Season 8? How about this one?
Thank you, sir.
What'd I do?
Oh, Mrs. Puff, thank you most of all.
Today, we'll be taking a look at 63 mistakes across Season 7, 8, and 9 of SpongeBob SquarePants. So, let's dive in. Number 1, I Heart Dancing. First up is I Heart Dancing from Season 7. In this episode, SpongeBob gets scouted out by a talent agency for showing off his impressive dancing skills. Squidward becomes envious and does everything he can to push SpongeBob to his limit and take his place. The first mistake in this episode happens pretty early on. Whenever SpongeBob says that the music is coming from his brain and literally pulls it out to show Squidward, his Krusty Krab hat disappears. We see it return right after when he moves it for his brain to fall back into his head. There is another mistake here that is easier to miss, but you should be able to spot it with the clip slowed down. When SpongeBob pulls out his brain, one of his teeth turns yellow for a frame. While SpongeBob is showing off his skills with the cane later on, he is wearing a red bow tie. It disappears between shots here while he is still performing. Soon after this mistake, another one occurs with Squidward. While he is talking, he waves his hand in front of his face. When he does this, his nose turns transparent for a frame. It might be a little difficult to see in real time, but it's noticeable when slowed down. Squidward is trying to wear SpongeBob out with dance moves at his place, but keep an eye on the photos in the background. At first, there are only 2 photos in the back, and they have purple backgrounds. But soon after, there are suddenly 3 photos in the back, and 2 of them have green backgrounds. At the very end of the episode, we have another mistake. Keep an eye on the neckline of Squidward's outfit. As he moves, dances, and talks, the neckline changes in nearly every scene of him. Sometimes it is very low, while other times it's higher up. Number 2, Gary in Love. Next is Gary in Love from Season 7. In this episode, Gary falls in love with a snail named Mary, and he sneaks out of his house in order to find her. During the scene when Gary sneaks out of the house, there are 2 mistakes. The lights to the pineapple are off and the door is left open. When the camera cuts back to the pineapple, the lights are suddenly on and the door is closed. Gary couldn't have possibly done that himself since he was already gone. And as far as we know, SpongeBob is still asleep. We get a glimpse of the character Monica on TV at the start of the episode, and we see she is a blue fish with blonde hair. But when we see her again later, she looks like this. This isn't just a fish that looks like Monica, it really is her. And if you look up the character from SpongeBob, you'll find this second version of her. They're even voiced by the same actress, meaning they're the character. Her appearance just changed either as an error or because her appearance as an actress on TV is different. Whenever a herd of blue worms are being walked across the street, one of them has blue teeth for a frame. It's hard to see, so it has to be slowed down. Now keep an eye on the second worm in the line closest to the camera. Its top teeth will turn blue right before it disappears off screen. Number 3, Rodeo Days. In Rodeo Days from Season 7, Sandy leaves for Texas to participate in a rodeo. SpongeBob is determined to save her, but no one else will help. He then kidnaps everyone in a bubble and takes them to Texas. At the start of the episode, SpongeBob and Patrick head on over to Sandy's. SpongeBob tries to open the door, but keep an eye on his right arm, the one farthest from the camera in this scene. It's easier to spot when it's slowed down, but as SpongeBob is trying to open the door, the gap between his arm and body flashes white for a frame. When SpongeBob starts kidnapping his neighbors, he goes for Squidward first. In this scene, you can see Squidward's right window is opened and the bubble squeezes through it. But just a few seconds later, when the bubble is leaving the house, that right window is closed. Squidward is seen wearing his eye mask on his forehead while inside SpongeBob's house. But the moment he walks out, it suddenly disappears. Another clothing mistake happens too, but with Mr. Krabs. He has on his blue PJs while in SpongeBob's house. But whenever he walks out and falls to the bottom of the bubble, he is suddenly wearing his normal clothes and continues wearing them for the remainder of the episode. Also, did you notice when everyone is leaving SpongeBob's house to go home, Gary is leaving too? Gary lives there. Unless he's so tired of his owner's craziness that he'd rather leave with everyone else. Speaking of Gary, there is a mistake involving him at the end of the episode. He can be seen here, in the bubble on top of everyone else. But when the bullfrog is jumping towards the bubble to pop it, Gary isn't there anymore. And the last thing I'd like to point out for this episode isn't an art or animation error, but simply an inconsistency. We know from before that the sea creatures can't live on dry land, but they seem to be doing just fine here in Texas. Number 4, Tunnel of Glove. Tunnel of Glove is another episode from Season 7. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick run into Pearl at Glove World, and her friends assume SpongeBob is her boyfriend. They end up on the Tunnel in Glove ride when things go wrong and they're stuck. Even worse, the animatronics turn on them. In the opening shot of this episode, there's an error. Right here, we can see the Glove World sign. But watch the fish underneath it. It's either supposed to be walking or something, but instead it just glitches around sporadically. While Pearl and SpongeBob are waiting in line for the Tunnel of Glove ride, there are 2 incidental 41s in the background. There is one in normal clothes, and another is wearing a white shirt with blue stripes. This isn't the first time there have been 2 incidental 41s in the background at Glove World. In the episode Glove World RIP, the same thing happens. There are 2 errors with the animatronic override sign. At first, the sign is in all caps and spelled right. And then when Patrick goes to lean on the wall, the word override is missing an R. When the animatronics turn on SpongeBob and Pearl, there is one on a balcony in a long green dress. From a distance, the dress looks like it goes down to her ankles, but during the close-up shot when it is about to attack SpongeBob and Pearl, the dress is much shorter. Here is another scene with 2 errors. There is a flag on the back of the boat and rope on the ground in front of SpongeBob and Pearl. When Pearl drops SpongeBob, both the flag and the rope are gone. Number 5, Mr. Krabs Takes a Vacation. Mr. Krabs Takes a Vacation from Season 8 is a pretty funny episode. Mr. Krabs and his daughter Pearl go on vacation, but he takes SpongeBob with him. They pass multiple places that they could be going to, but Mr. Krabs keeps saying they're going somewhere better, which ends up being a money-making factory. At the very beginning of the episode, everyone is at Mr. Krabs' house as he gives a PowerPoint presentation about his planned vacation. In this scene, Sandy's neck is the wrong color. It is normally a darker shade of brown, but in this scene, it's tanned like the rest of her face. While on their way to their vacation spot, SpongeBob makes a joke about a bathroom land, which cracks Mr. Krabs up. When he is responding, keep an eye on Mr. Krabs' eyelashes. For a moment in this scene, they turn transparent. While getting a tour of the money printing factory, there is a blue fish in the tourist group. He is blue with brown pants throughout most of the episode. But in this one shot here, he is dark green. Whether or not this fish was supposed to be Fred, he definitely looks like Fred for one scene. This isn't the only instance of a mistake with the tourist group. This guy has been wearing a white t-shirt the entire time, but randomly, here, it's tan. It turns white again when Mr. Krabs runs by him. Number 6. Restraining SpongeBob. Next up is Restraining SpongeBob from Season 8. After all these years of dealing with SpongeBob's antics, Squidward finally puts a restraining order on him. In order to ensure the Krusty Krab isn't affected by this, they hire Patrick. But Patrick annoys Squidward so much that he realizes SpongeBob wasn't so bad to begin with. When Squidward's lawyer shows up, he draws a line around Squidward's workstation that SpongeBob can't cross. However, there are some inconsistencies throughout the episode. Like right here, we can see the line is probably a few feet from the door frame. But soon after, we see that the line is right up against the door frame. Squidward's nose ends up in Patrick's mouth, unfortunately for Squidward. When he lifts his hand and tries to push Patrick's face away, watch Patrick's eyebrow. It disappears for a moment and then returns. And this last mistake we'll be looking at for this episode has to do with the restraining order itself. In this scene, Mr. Krabs uses the paper with the order on it to wipe mustard off himself. Next time we see the paper though, it is perfectly clean. Number 7, InSPONGEiac. In InSPONGEiac from Season 8, SpongeBob becomes an insomniac. After Mr. Krabs points out he isn't working properly because he missed out on 2 minutes of sleep, SpongeBob tries to correct his sleeping habits. However, the stress causes him to actually become an insomniac, and he can barely function. We have another mistake at the start of an episode. When SpongeBob is mopping back and forth, watch his pores. Instead of staying on a certain side, it looks as if he's just mirrored. Mr. Krabs calculates how a 1% loss of mustard per Krabby Patty can cause him to go broke in 411 years.
Oh, at this rate I'll be broken 411 years!
But look at the numbers he's adding up. 100 plus 201 plus 210. That actually equals 511, not 411. Either way, Mr. Krabs shouldn't need to worry because the average lifespan of a crab is only 3 to 5 years. There are a lot of episodes where SpongeBob's eyes or teeth turn yellow for a frame, and this one is no exception. When Mr. Krabs is kicking him out, his left eye turns yellow and his eyelashes are missing. Once again, this clip will have to be slowed down so you can really see it, but it happens around the time SpongeBob is turning around. Another common error across episodes is Squidward's house just up and vanishing. Here, when SpongeBob is running over to Patrick's house, Squidward's house is just completely gone. Patrick mistakes SpongeBob for food and tries to take a bite out of him. When he does this, he has no teeth for the first few frames. Towards the end of the episode, SpongeBob shows up to work sleep-deprived and covered in litter. He still has it on him as he makes his way to the kitchen. Just a moment later, when Mr. Krabs follows him, the litter is gone. Number 8. Hotshot. Next is Hotshot from Season 8. In this episode, a son of a race car driver, Tony Fast, enrolls at Mrs. Puff's boating school. Mrs. Puff believes Tony Jr. might actually be able to teach SpongeBob how to drive, but her plans backfire and everything ends in destruction. When SpongeBob arrives at boating school, everyone is cheering and he thanks them, believing the celebration is for him. As he is going down the line, the last fish asks,
Thank you, sir.
What'd I do?
When he does this, the eye on the right turns red for a second. This next mistake is one that happens pretty fast, so it'll have to be slowed down. Keep an eye on SpongeBob's eyelashes. When he moves his head down slightly, they turn transparent for a frame and you can see the road behind him. Eventually, the episode ends in disaster. In this scene, watch SpongeBob. His face looks normal, but when Mrs. Puff inflates, SpongeBob's eyelashes disappear. SpongeBob seems fine in this scene, but after the transition, we see he's in the hospital after the accident, even though it looked as if he was completely unharmed before. Number 9. DriveThrough. DriveThrough is another episode from Season 8, and as the name suggests, the Krusty Krab gets a drive-through. When Mr. Krab puts a hole in the wall, a customer assumes it's a drive-through window and Mr. Krabs just goes with it in the cheapest way possible. Business is booming, but it's way more traffic than what 2 employees can handle. Now, this episode has a lot of mistakes, so get ready. First, we see the regular Krusty Krab right here. There's an antenna on the roof, but in this shot of the boat driving around it, the antenna is gone. Somehow, this guy mistakes this hole for a drive-through. When he notices he's leaned on toothpaste, look at SpongeBob's arm. His body is overlapping with the sleeve. Mr. Krabs does some rearranging for the sake of the new drive-through. He is shown putting SpongeBob and the grill in his office and his desk in the kitchen. But later on, SpongeBob is suddenly back in the kitchen. Mr. Krabs also puts his desk closer to the refrigerator, which we see him do here. But in the next shot of him in the kitchen, it's now closer to the condiment station. Squidward ends up with a bandaged ear thanks to the drive-through, and we see him wearing those bandages here. And then, just a moment later, we see him back at the drive-through line without the bandages. If the transition card is to be believed, barely enough time has passed for that injury to heal. The mayor shows up, and while he is talking, the gold button on his tux turns white for a second. It's even noticeable without having to slow down the clip. During the rush to get everyone in and out of the drive-through line, SpongeBob can be seen carrying a tray of 26 orders. In this clip, keep an eye on SpongeBob's leg around the time he says 26.
26 orders up!
SpongeBob passes behind the pole, and when we see him again, the leg closest to the camera turns white. The drive-through is turning into chaos. Here, one car rear-ends another, but look at the fish that hit the other car. Where his fin or arm meets his body, it's all orange. We see him at a few different angles, but when the camera cuts back to the same angle as before, where his fin meets his body is now green. At the very end of the episode, there is a boat in the background with a yellow flag that can be seen through the window of the Krusty Krab, but in between shots, the flag disappears. Number 10. Goodbye, Krabby Patty. Goodbye, Krabby Patty is an episode from Season 9. After SpongeBob gives Mr. Krabs the idea to sell frozen Krabby Patties in stores, Mr. Krabs seeks out how to do this. The Krusty Krab ends up getting turned into a museum in the process. SpongeBob is always wearing his same outfits, and that includes his signature red tie. In this scene, he can be seen wearing it, but if you look closely, it disappears. There is a sign in the factory that counts the days without incidents. It reads 0 day without incidents, which is a grammatical error. In this scene, from inside the Krusty Krab. The chum bucket should be visible across the street, but it's nowhere to be seen. Number 11, extreme spots. Next is extreme spots from season 9. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick try to join an extreme sports team called the Drastic Radicals. Of course, SpongeBob and Patrick mishear a guy with a lisp and think it's extreme spots, resulting in some confusion, but they still get their chance to be a part of the team. Patrick is stung by multiple jellyfish in order to obtain spots. However, this is the only scene where we see these spots, because the next time we see Patrick, they vanished. One of the first things they get to do with the Drastic Radicals is ride motorcycles. But in this scene, SpongeBob's arms are literally detached from his body and stuck to the handles. Whenever he finally makes it on the bike and goes through a bunch of sand dunes, we see him with his arms suddenly back on. This next mistake is super hard to see, and the clip has to be slowed down. Whenever Johnny Krill breaks the washing machine, the pillow that falls out becomes slightly transparent a few times. Number 12, Sharks vs. Pods. Next up is Sharks vs. Pods from season 9. In this episode, SpongeBob joins a dancing group called the Sharks. SpongeBob becomes wary of the group and their rivals, the Pods, and chooses to leave, and they abduct Gary. But it all turns out to be a misunderstanding. When Ronnie calls SpongeBob a baby, and SpongeBob pretends to be one, the black jacket that they gave him disappears for a scene, and he is just in normal clothes. But in the next shot, before they drive off, the jacket is back. SpongeBob is preparing for battle with his trusty spatulas. Whenever he cuts everything in his room, his TV gets destroyed. But look at the shadow of it on the wall. It remains the same and doesn't move even when the TV is cut in half. There's another instance of clothes disappearing and then reappearing. Here, Squidward has blue pants, but in this scene, he has none until they reappear. Mr. Krabs is here to oversee the dance-off and announce the winner. When he does so, he opens his eyes, and the stalks are white instead of their normal light green color. Number 13, Sold. Lastly is Sold from season 9. SpongeBob and Patrick believe their homes have been sold after watching a commercial, and so they live like they're homeless. Squidward tricks them into thinking people have moved into their houses and poses as a German guy and a rocker. As usual, things backfire for Squidward. The first mistake happens here, where we see Squidward's house, but SpongeBob and Patrick's house are missing. Earlier, SpongeBob says this:
Well, aren't your 12 little German children gonna sing for me while I eat?
But when the children actually sing for SpongeBob in this scene, there are only 8. Throughout the entire episode, Squidward's house has a purple tint to it, except for this one scene where SpongeBob is about to flip it. It is blue instead. When SpongeBob and Patrick flip Squidward's house, watch SpongeBob's pineapple. It is missing its bottom right window, but it returns in the next shot. Well, that's all for today. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe. Then click the video on screen to watch our newest video. See you there.